Hi. Wait, yes, much better. Much better. Anyway, so I was sitting on my bed eating dinner and watching YouTube videos yesterday when I came across a series of videos by Bionicdance, more specifically the videos she made in response to Nicotine 2. And 2 points became obvious to me as I watched her. One, Bionicdance does not believe what she claims in these videos. You will see what I mean in these clips. The hypocrisy is pretty obvious.
It really is a shame when you have to pwn one of your own. But the truth is that when someone's wrong, atheist or theist, you kind of have to make it known. And, alas, nicotine too is very, very wrong. The fact is that if morals are in fact relative, then how can it be wrong to do anything? We may not like it, we may think it's a bad idea, but wrong? Well, that's a matter of opinion, isn't it? If that truck really does exist, it's going to objectively hit you and kill you, whether you believe it or perceive it or not. But it seems that a lot of people want to muddy the waters and make it so that objective can refer to something that we can know or feel.
So you can't know if a bus is going to hit you except when a bus is going to hit you. I mean, at this point, I completely ignore her tortured logic anyway, and move on to my second point, which is that Sam Harris clearly refutes her argument repeatedly. Is just her argument boils down to the next statement.
But morality is an opinion on how people ought to behave. And you can't get an is from an ought. So, how exactly are we going to get objective morality? Morality that is true regardless of opinion?
This covers Hume's famous notion of you can't get an ought from an is. You can't get a statement of how we should behave or how the world should be based on a description of the way it is. You can't get an is without an ought. You can't make the most basic scientific statement without conforming to the norms of scientific rationality.
At this point, Sam Harris goes on for 2 hours. I mean, he did write a book about this stuff. You'd think Bionicdance could read, but let me summarize it for you. You see, both Bionicdance and Sam Harris agree that humans perceive reality as observers. The material objects we perceive make up reality. The consistent relationships between the objects we see are considered objective relationships, while the relationships between the observer and the object are considered subjective relationships. Sam Harris's point, and what Bionicdance doesn't seem to get, is that objective relationships don't exist outside of subjective perceptions. Subjectivity doesn't relate to one part of reality. It relates to all of reality, including objective conclusions. In conclusion, all objective conclusions have always been determined despite the subjective nature of human experience. Take a general example of two people looking at a mysterious object. Say one person believes it's green Play-Doh and the other believes it's a blue ball of yarn. Science doesn't just say that's okay. It can be both a ball of yarn and Play-Doh at the same time. No, science developed rulers, scales, color wheels, etc. as objective measures to help define objects. By using these objective measures, the two people can gather evidence and support a conclusion they both agree on. As a clear counterexample, let's now enter the hypothetical subjective universe and revisit the same two people. The same two people are trying to measure a set distance with a ruler. One person measures the distance 100 times and gets 3 feet 3 inches, then passes the ruler to the next person. The next person experiences the ruler to be longer and measures the distance 100 times as 1 foot 8 inches. In this hypothetical universe, the evidence will never agree. The two persons' subjective experiences will never be the same. In fact, there will never be evidence. And without evidence, there is no science, no certainty, no community, no communication. And you're left wondering, why bother? Why bother doing anything in a hypothetical subjective universe if no two people can agree on anything? Luckily for us, we can return to the real world, and if we are to exist, then we can completely ignore subjectivity. We ignore subjectivity because, at best, subjective experience is all equivalent and the point is completely irrelevant, and at worst, all claims are equally invalidated and the point is completely irrelevant. It's kind of like knowing that a comet might hit the Earth at any time, because at the best case scenario, the comet doesn't hit the Earth, it goes bye-bye, and you keep living your life. It's completely irrelevant to your life. But in worst case scenario, comet hits the Earth, destroys everything, and you don't exist, the planet doesn't exist, in which case it's completely irrelevant to your life. What is relevant and what is important is the only relationships which can be said to truly matter in the universe, which are the objective relationships. Objective relationships, just like giving you examples like gravity. Gravity can be said to truly matter because a gravitational relationship makes things happen in the real world. It causes balls to bounce. And it also, you can get it very, very wrong. Say I jump from a building screaming, I can fly. Well, the gravitational relationship will prove to me very rapidly that I am completely wrong about that. In the same way that gravity can be said to truly matter, suffering can be said to truly matter. I can see people suffer. There are women screaming about their dead babies in the Congo. I mean, that is suffering. I can measure it. I can put them in a brain scanner and say, this person is miserable. Suffering is an objective phenomenon. Suffering has an important role in determining moral principles. Moral principles should lessen suffering. At this point, it is really important to note a comparison between notions of morality and notions of public health. I mean, the notion of public health isn't to create the strongest person imaginable, but general exercise is really important to public health. In the same way, suffering might not be the only important factor in determining the best moral system. It's just one factor that we have to really consider seriously. And just with this one factor, if we can just agree on developing one principle, like one is sufferingology, the morality of avoiding all suffering, that alone agrees on a goal. And sufferingology becomes an evidence-based morality. The evidence will determine what moral principles will avoid suffering. In conclusion, I believe Sam Harris does the best job of summing up exactly what creates the problem with people who don't want to look at evidence. And I bow before his next clip.
What do we do if someone comes into the room and says, well, that's not how I choose to think about water? What do we do when someone says, well, I'm a biblical chemist, and you can get your chemistry from science, but I get my chemistry from the book of Genesis, and whatever squares with Genesis is chemistry for me. Okay, now, again, see the analogy to moral truth. The only thing we can do in that case is appeal to scientific values. I mean, you have to value understanding the universe. You have to value evidence. You have to value logical consistency. If you don't value these things, the conversation stops. There is no convincing someone who doesn't value evidence that they should value it. What evidence are you going to provide to convince someone that they should value evidence? Okay, what logical argument are you going to offer to convince them of the necessity of obeying the rules of logic? Okay, so even the most basic scientific statements, I mean, you don't get more basic than the chemistry of water, you don't get more value-free than the chemistry of water, are anchored to values at every point.
On a side note, it's not usually a good idea for 16-year-old girls to accuse PhD philosophers and best-selling authors of not thinking about arguments. It reminds me that
the world is thinking.